Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Clinic Gym Radio. I'm your host, as always, Dr. Josh Satterlee, and I am honored today to be talking to Dr. Brian Waters from Indianapolis. Brian, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Josh. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. I love the name of your clinic, Indy Muscle and Joint Clinic. You might have the best branding I've ever seen. You sent me some stickers. I've got the shirt. It's as clean and as visible as anything I've ever seen, including the sign on the front of your building, which we'll get to later. But how long you had this place?
So we opened exactly almost 1 year ago.
Awesome.
I think I just posted something on social media yesterday. It said 1 year.
Well, congratulations. I would love if we can go through kind of your first year of having the blended clinic and gym and kind of give everybody some, maybe a couple things that went really well and a couple that didn't go so hot, and maybe that'll help them out on their journey. Does that sound good to you?
Yeah, absolutely. It was definitely a learning experience.
There's no other way to get through it, right? Like you got to jump into the pool and learn how to swim. So congratulations. So let's go back. Where'd you graduate from and what'd you do right out of school?
Yep. So chiropractic school, I went to Logan. I came out of undergrad with chemistry, pre-med, all that standard stuff. And knew that I wanted to go into chiropractic. So I went to Logan, pretty close, about 5 hours from here. And it was pretty moderate as far as progressive, mixed between traditional and progressive at the time. So I got out of school, wanted to go into kind of the rehab realm. Everybody's, the sexy thing is I want to work with athletes. I didn't really care to work with athletes. I just wanted to work. I just wanted to do stuff. So I knew I wanted to go back to this region, did like a demographic search, families around here. So did a demographic on, disposable income, things like that. They always encourage you to do that in school. And I was like, I waited till the last semester I ran and I was like, this is actually really important. It tells you if somebody's going to have an extracurricular, sport or something they can do after work, this is the area they're going to do it because they have all this disposable income. So picked basically north side of Indianapolis, which you've got Hamilton County. It's a nice suburb, good schools, things like that, and set up shop. So that was 2011 December.
And were you working with somebody else, renting space in another office, renting office or space in a gym? How'd you do it at first?
Yep. So it's similar to like an IC, independent contractor type setup. Basically did rent space. I had my own phone number, had my own LLC, but used their umbrella basically. Cause I always thought it was confusing if, hey, I'm Brian Waters practicing out of this group and my name is this. I just always said, hey, Brian Waters from this group. But basically practicing, renting a room, things like that. I always knew that I wanted to kind of go out on my own. You never know where you're going to end up, opportunities, things like that. So I always had my own phone number, which I forget who told me early on, even if you just have it forwarded to that main clinic, have your own phone number that you advertise. And I took that with me, obviously, when I left.
Yeah, one thing, this podcast is sponsored by Clinic Gym Connect, which is our software. And the reason, one of the advantages there, not to jump right into the sponsorship, but you set it up perfectly, is when people establish their own phone number and you get patients communicating through there, those patients become portable. I say, like you can take them from that office to another office as you did, or in COVID times, like, hey, we're running classes out in this park. They're still portable as long as you control the method of communication. It was funny. I was talking recently to a guy who was a Navy SEAL for a few years, and he made the point. He said, the easiest way to take over any area, the first thing you attack, communication systems. Once you take out those, everything's fine. And I think, well, the opposite's true. Like the first thing you got to do if you want to grow a clinic, you have to communicate. Once you can communicate and your clients are communicating back to you, it's easy after that, right? Because you can say, hey, we're hosting exercise classes, or we have this special on dry needling or whatever. But if you don't have good communication, these people that like really don't have a line of communication with their patients, man, it is an uphill battle.
Yeah, absolutely. I did get some kickback in the beginning. Older doctors were like, you shouldn't have a number that they can reach you at all the time because it went to my cell phone. But, I think over the years, I've kind of almost established it as it's very similar to like a concierge type. This is what you get when you come to me. Now, as I have grown, I've realized I can automate that a little bit differently. But in the beginning, it was like, hey, I can text this patient. They and text me, schedule things like that.
Especially when you have time and no money. It's like, I'll call them. I'll talk to them. I don't care.
Yeah, exactly. Just don't send me pictures of injuries. I don't want to see weird bruised thighs.
Exactly. Well, congratulations. So about a year ago, you finally opened up your spot, which I'm sure you had about 6 months before that of planning and searching and permits and all the fun stuff that comes along with getting your own spot. I wanted to talk about today, maybe 5 lessons you've learned in having your own spot finally, because as you're saying, you were a practicing chiropractor, you're working out of an office, you saw patients, you could have stayed there for your career, right? And just operated there, but you decided to kind of change it. So if you don't mind, let's go through a couple lessons you've learned in that first year. How's that sound?
It sounds good. I was going to say, kind of to come off of that, one of the reasons I did leave, because honestly, everybody always asked, Brian, why don't you start your own? Why don't you start, this is 2 to 5 years into practice. That's usually the sweet spot is for me that I've seen is after 2 to 5 years, you get that client base and they're like, hey, why don't you start your own? Here's the funding, you get all these opportunities and I, being in another clinic, I just kept running the numbers. I'm like, no, this is a really good gig. I wrote a contract. I had a really good contract, really good doctor I was working with, good team. And then what ended up happening about 3 years ago, I started bodybuilding again, and that's a whole nother story. But I wanted to kind of create my own brand. What I realized is I was building this other brand, and I don't want to sound selfish, but it didn't benefit me. I wanted to grow my own thing. And anyway, that's what kind of, I wanted to expand and hire trainers, hire massage therapists, hire other chiropractors and that build my own team. But anyway, yeah, we can go over some stuff I learned for sure. That's
awesome, man. Are you still a competitive bodybuilder?
Yeah. So I got my pro card about a year and a half ago. So I'm kind of new to the pro circuit. My first pro show will be this year.
Yeah. And is it like, how's that divided? Like age, classification? How do they divide it up so you can compete?
So once you're a pro, once you have your pro card is what they call it, you can basically float around to the different divisions. So I'm either bodybuilding, classic physique, or physique. Those are the 3 in guys. There's also age. But again, once you're an IFBB, you kind of float around in that whole kind of area. But then certain shows will be like, okay, this show's only for 35 and up. This show's only for 50 and up. Or when you compete at these shows, there's different groups within that show. But you can basically do what we call open, which is just like, hey, if I want to go do strongman and I want to, go up against, the greats, that's the open. Otherwise, it's like, okay, this is the category. This is the category. But yeah, once you're an IFBB, you can just float around. So there's 2 categories that are most important. It's weight. It's by weight. So 212 and below, which where I would be. And then the open, which would be, like the Ronnie Colemans and the Jay Cutlers and the big guys. So anyway, yeah.
Just out of curiosity, what do you walk around at? And then what do you compete at weight wise?
So right now, this is the heaviest I've ever been. I walk around about 220, 225. I'm 5'5". So it's pretty heavy. I think it's stage 3 obesity, if you break it down, something like that. And then
I feel like a fire hydrant, right?
I mean,
yeah, but real dense.
Yeah, exactly. Short guy, big muscles is what people call me. No, but the 212 and under, I would basically be competing against these 212 guys. I've never competed at that, so I don't know what I'm going to be. I'm going to approximate 180. I used to compete at 150 to 170. So this is going to be the heaviest I've ever competed.
Wow. Well, congratulations, and definitely let us know how you do. It'd be great to hear.
Yeah.
So going back to the other thing you're competing in, which is business. So what's the first lesson you learned? And for people listening, Brian and I kind of talked about maybe 2 bad, 2 good lessons, and then one that, it's kind of neutral, but kind of waiting to see how it turns out. And we'll judge it later on good or bad. But what's the first kind of lesson you learned opening up after your first year of having your own place?
So I always like to start with the good. So that's what I'll do here. But I guess the first good lesson I learned was location, as they say, right? I looked for, obviously I had to non-compete and all these different factors, but I got a place right on a lake. And I said this to you earlier, but when people come, they're like, you said you're on the lake. You're right on the lake. I'm like, yeah, there's the lake right there in the parking lot. So it's kind of nice to be kind of in a nice little area. I am kind of in a strip center, I guess you could call it. I'm used to being in an executive park or a medical place, but being on a lake like that, it kind of takes people's mind off the fact that you're next to, which is actually good, an ice cream shop. I know you like ice cream.
Yeah.
But it's a really good location that patients appreciate. And if you're in a nicer area, they're like, okay, this is where I want to be.
So you're in kind of a strip building. There's like a gym next door to you, I think. There's an ice cream shop. So it's not truly an outdoor mall, but it's a bunch of businesses in the same plaza.
Yeah, I think it's legally considered that. And when you pull those permits, you understand, like, do I need a handicap restroom and all these different things? I think it's technically considered that, but yeah, it looks just like it's got a big overhang and then, walk around space outside patios and things, but restaurants and things like that. So a lot of people that travel to see us, which we can pull up to 2 hours, which is awesome for being kind of in this niche that we have. They'll come and eat dinner before or after or whatever. So it's nice. Okay. Hey, you're going to get the service, but to travel 2 hours and then, right next door, you can, get some ice cream or go across.
Rather than you being in like the back of an industrial plaza or something like that, where they get treated and then basically have to leave there to go get anything else.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's nice. All right. And how long did it take you to find the perfect location?
That's a really funny story. I went through a real estate guy just to help me speed up the search, because I basically told the last clinic a specified period of time, 30 to 60 days out. And then I was like, crap, I've got 30 to 60 days to find a place. And in the middle of the winter, this is pre-COVID, so obviously not a lot of opening spaces. And within my non-compete, at that radius, that circle I drew around, there was a ton of stuff. But then outside that radius, which was where I needed to be, there was like 2 things. So I went and saw the one place and I was like, oh my gosh, it was like 3 times as expensive as I wanted. It was an old dentist office. Great location, but they had ripped out all the sinks and it was a mess. They were like, yeah, it'd only take about $25,000 for a build out. And I was like, yeah, I don't think so. And then this was the second place. It wasn't even available. I was looking at a space upstairs and I said, hey, I can't do upstairs. They had an elevator, but it's hard to find. I need accessibility. I need you to be able to walk right in.
Yeah.
And they said, well, we have the space downstairs. It was actually the gym next door closing off, basically getting smaller, trying to kind of narrow his space. And so, yeah, we went downstairs and I said, yep, found it. So I found it within probably 3 days.
Wow. That's awesome. And it's a great space. I've seen the pictures online. So incredible. So location was definitely a win, and having that great location for your people, definitely something you'd recommend and worked out for you. What's another positive or another good thing that worked out for you?
Well, so about 5 weeks after we opened, I started thinking about, grand openings, all these things, the quarantine hit basically. Mm-hmm. So kind of a mild freak out, but, I'd been in business for so long. Outside of that, I had patients that trusted me and things like that. But I had a really good group with us and some downtime. I personally didn't have as much downtime. Luckily, again, it was about 2 weeks of kind of awkward, 60% capacity kind of thing.
Right. When everybody was still scared to leave their house, basically.
Correct. We were like, okay, 2 weeks to slow the curve and then after that, boom, I was back up to 90, 98, 99% capacity, which was great. But again, the other doc and then 2 other massage therapists, personal trainer, it was a good time for them to kind of communicate to me what were their needs, what could I help with them with. It's something where we could build them up and they could kind of really slow down and see the nuts and bolts of how to start their own thing. Because I try to, I've done a lot of mentoring and teaching over the years, and I try to show people what's worked for me in hopes that maybe one day they'll start their own or, help grow them.
Just out of curiosity, I mean, a lot of people here, have those, let's say, secondary. So the massage therapist and the personal trainer or the coach or whatever you want to call that person, where you can really offload a lot of work there. In those 2 weeks, what did you learn was the thing that they needed most? Because oftentimes we think like, they want to understand injuries, but sometimes it's not that, just understanding the workings and things. What did you find really was a great solution to that?
Well, the number one thing that I felt like they needed, and they told me that, was money, right? That was their biggest fear. And I said, listen, I'll take care of you guys, make sure that you can at least pay your bills. And, obviously the PPP helped with that. And that's exactly what I did is I used that, even though I didn't have to. That's a big chunk of that. But I think the biggest thing that they wanted to learn during that period was how do they become better at customer service? Because you don't learn that in school. You don't learn how to communicate with people in front of people. And along with customer service is like marketing. What can I do? What can I do? Not necessarily in person, but what should I start thinking about as far as marketing goes? And that's where we sat down and I said, okay, not only can you listen to me in shadow as much as you want and kind of hear how I talk to patients and this communication and customer service thing, they got to see that and how the office ran, but they also saw, hey, now's the time to start typing, do some blogs, do some articles, do some research, do some, things that you wouldn't necessarily have time to do starting out. Now you do, let's post this blog post and then blast it across social media and let people know, hey, I know what I'm talking about. Check this out if you haven't. And that actually worked quite a few times. But then also the just getting creative with marketing in a time where you can't really go in person. We did get lucky. I encouraged the other doc to reach out to different medical practices. We get a lot of referrals for orthos, dentists, things like that. He reached out to a lot of them, and a lot of them early on, we could still go visit the doctors, and kind of behind the scenes, we started getting some referrals because a lot of the doctors started shutting down those unnecessary, quote unquote, medical procedures. So we started getting a lot of like conservative musculoskeletal referrals from medical doctors and ortho. And that was fun because they did get to be in front of people where I wouldn't have necessarily emphasized that if this was, let's say, a quote unquote normal year. So just trying to find people that you could still talk to.
Nice. Well, glad it worked out in many ways, right? It sounds like you built relationships with the orthos. Your team got the experience. I can imagine it built up your practice a little bit. So it seemed to work out for everybody pretty well.
Yeah, it did.
All right. So your location was great. Your team was great, but not everything's great. So what was the first kind of shot to the chin you took?
Well, so we waited to set our sign up outside because, again, we started 5 weeks later, boom, I sunk all my life savings into this place. I didn't want to take out loans. At that time, I didn't have any loans. So we were just kind of waiting to put the sign up. So I start getting quotes because I say, hey, we're going to be essential. We can stay open, at least for now. Let's just get the sign up because that's more visibility. It's going to look cool. It's going to be great. People are going to this ice cream place next door every day in March, which is crazy. It's cold out, but no one's at work or school. So everybody's getting ice cream every day. I'm like, they're standing out there staring at my space. They need to know what's here. So we get a quote. We get 3 quotes. And I went with the cheapest quote. And I had used this company before.
Just out of curiosity, what are we talking about dollar-wise? Because one thing I want people to listen to is signage is one thing that nobody talks about in business and is so god-awful expensive. I mean, when you get those quotes, you're like, are we talking about the same sign? Because this quote looks like a billboard, and you're like, I'm just talking about the thing on the front of my building.
$5,000 to $10,000 for this. You see my logo. It's 4 letters, big letters, and then like 10 to 15 little letters. And the guy's like, it's approximately $500 a letter or whatever. He gives me, a random number for each letter. I'm like, $500 per letter. So I went with the cheapest quote because it was still $5,500. And I thought, well, that's a steal. I think the next quote was $6,800 or $7,000. I was like, what's the difference? What are the, is the quality different? And I did some digging. I saw some other signs. I'm like, nope, it's the exact same. I think they did some things differently to cut down on costs. But so I went the cheapest and everything started going well until they came out. There was a couple of mishaps with, they hung it in the wrong spot. So they hung it 4 feet to the right. It wasn't even centered. And so I said, hey, are you guys done? And they were like, yeah, we're done. I was like, well, it doesn't light up and it's 4 feet to the right. And so like you go through permits for that, you have to match the permit. So I gave them the sheet. They came back and I gave them the sheet and they were kind of mad about it. And I'm like, the sheets, it shows you exactly where you need to be and it doesn't light up. And they're like, well, so they put it in the right spot, huffing and puffing. And then they tried to hook it up. And as they were playing around with the breaker box, and mind you, this is a medical clinic. So everybody that comes in, we're thinking, okay, they need to sign in, they need to be escorted. But we're just open and we're not busy. It's at lunch. So the receptionist takes the guy back to the back. He gets to the panel, which is right there in my break area in this closet. And then I go back in to see a patient. I come out, I go out, they're gone. I go back to the back. Everything is everywhere. Like all my stuff is just scattered, and all of our camera equipment's missing that we used, during this time. Like I said, we were trying to, blog posts, and we're going to do more YouTube videos and record some stuff. All my microphones, my camera equipment, over $1,000 was gone. Luckily, I had gotten a security camera, which people made fun of me, said, "Oh, you don't need a security camera in Geist. It's a nice area." I'm like, exactly. I need a security camera. So I caught the guy on camera, turned into the police. He got, charged with, I think, a misdemeanor and a felony because it was over $700 or something. And luckily, after about 6 more weeks, the sign company helped me. They worked with me on price because of that. So that was an interesting experience that I learned a lot from.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, a couple lessons. People, I want people to hear, because you're reminding me of multiple things. I worked with a lot of contractors in my day, and never underestimate the fact that they do not see your end vision. Like that, to them, the sign up on the building might be sufficient, but to you, you want it specifically centered over your door or over a big window or something where you're like, anybody in their right mind would put the sign over here. Don't ever assume that, because the contractor, I'm trying to be nice to them and not say that they're dumb, because they're not. I mean, they're usually hardworking people. Like sometimes it's like finding the best place for power. They're like, oh, it'd be so much easier to mount it 4 feet to the right or something else, So I don't ever want to say like I don't appreciate the work they do, but be very clear with where you want this thing. Like if you're having somebody install something, like I've used the blue tape method, you get some of that blue painter's tape and you put like right here, like sign, place the eye of Indy right here. And they're like, well, that's farther over than the plan saying. Like, I don't care, Or I had a client, and they had this 900 square foot gym that was kind of like a perfect rectangle. And so the contractor decided they had to put in a drinking fountain because the city said you have to have a drinking fountain. Put it in the easiest place, which was dead center in the wall between 2 squat racks, right? Now, if you look at that gym, I think anybody with the right mind would look and say, the only place in this entire rectangle you should not put a drinking fountain would be on that wall between the 2 squat racks, because whoever's getting a drink is going to get concussed by the end of the Eleiko barbell getting upside their temple when somebody's doing like barbell squats. And it's just like, he came in, he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, we already installed it. Sorry, it's going to cost you. And he's like, no. And he points and he's like, I clearly marked over there, just taking a piece of printer paper and said, place drinking fountain here. And they're like, oh, we didn't. It's a huge piece of paper with Sharpie on it. So anyways, yeah, that's one lesson, is don't be scared to tell your contractor exactly how you want it. And most of the time they will push back on you. They'll, I don't want to say argue, but they'll be like, oh no, you can't do that. You can't do that. And you can, especially when you're the person paying. So just stick with it and don't let them intimidate. And then the other thing is, the lowest cost, the lowest bid oftentimes costs more in the end, for whatever reason. All the headaches you dealt with, and thank God you weren't super busy when that sign was getting installed, or, but it's just funny when those people just like show up whenever. They don't care where their ladder goes. They don't care where their cigarette butts go. They don't care where their truck's parked, I mean, I've had electrical contractors parking in the handicap spot in front of our office. I'm like, we're going to get busted. You are going to get towed if you keep your truck. Well, it's just more convenient. I'm like, I understand that. Handicap spots are usually very conveniently placed. In fact, like as a tradition, they are. That doesn't mean you should be there. So it's so funny. So anyways, so that was number one bad thing that happened. What's the other thing that you wish you could have kind of done differently?
Yeah. So when I knew that I had a location picked out, I should have started getting in network again with these insurances with, that I already was in network with, for 10 years with the new tax ID number. I had talked to several doctors, colleagues that had moved practices, because mind you, this was the first time I was doing this. And they said, oh yeah, you want to wait and it won't take too long. And I mean, some of the insurances took 6 months to get a network with because, well, everybody wanted to blame it on COVID, but honestly, everybody was kind of scattered. They were working from home. There wasn't a lot of communication with these companies. The emails weren't getting to the right places. They didn't have the right computer at home, whatever. But I wish I would have started getting in network at least 30 days, 60 days earlier if I could have, instead of waiting till, okay, I'm in the space physically. Now I should start doing this. But as soon as you have that address, that tax ID, you're basically good to go.
Right. And for those listening, like it's okay to operate both at the same time. You can say like, I want both to work, and I'm operating this clinic 99% of the time and this 1% of the time. And then later just call them and say, it's now 60-40. And then you call them later and say, hey, I closed that other location. I'm no longer treating out of there. I'm only treating out of this. Like those transitions are easy to do. And hospitals do that all the time when they're opening up a new clinic or something. But they have entire departments that are credentialing departments for their doctors, Just out of curiosity, did you end up getting in network with every insurance you wanted to, or there's some that just didn't work out at all?
No, yeah, we did. And luckily I had done all that prior, but this new, the younger doc helped me multiple times with the computer stuff just because it was a little bit different. Obviously we had the CAQH back then, but now all the electronic payment information, I didn't get all that settled for a while. But yeah, I think the hardest one, one of the easiest ones was Medicare. And then the hardest one was probably a local insurance, which is really interesting because it's the one I could have walked to their place or, driven to, talk to someone in person and said, here's all my information. And that took almost 6 months. So it's funny, the bigger companies sometimes do have a better flow, but the local one, I thought, surely this will be the easiest one to get, but no, it wasn't.
Yeah. It's always disappointing when you're like, I'm staring at your building and like, can we work together here? So,
exactly.
Anyways, that's fantastic to hear. Hey, real quick, I just want to give our little sponsorship line here. So this podcast, like every Clinic Gym hybrid podcast or Clinic Gym radio podcast, is sponsored by Clinic Gym Connect. And we developed Clinic Gym Connect as a communication platform to make it easier and more efficient to communicate with your patients. So do it through text messaging. Emails get open 20% of the time. They get read less than 5% of the time, and they get responded to 1% of the time. Whereas text messages, 98% open rate, 98% readability rate, and about 68% response rate, which is huge, which is where you want to be. So if you want to remind your patient, hey, we have these COVID restrictions. You have to wear a mask. You have to do X, Y, Z. You can send that to them, get a response. You can give them instructions, and doing it all through text messaging works so much faster. So if you're interested in communicating better with your patients and marketing your practice, then check out Clinic Gym Connect, and you can check it out at clinicgymconnect.com. Again, that's clinicgymconnect.com. And now we're back with Dr. Brian Waters. All right, Brian. So you had a couple good things. You had a couple bad things. Some things just never truly come to an end in that first year. Is there anything you're kind of neutral on, and we'll see whether it's going to turn out good or bad?
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of neutrals, but the biggest one I think was I did buy a climb mill, a Matrix climb mill, certified pre-owned. I looked for it for months and got a really good deal on it because I was in the process of buying the gym next door to expand and obviously do a boutique style gym and refer over rehab patients and things like that, and kind of build more of what you always talk about.
And for those listening, we're not talking about a 10,000 square foot gym. This is a relatively small gym right now that happens to be exactly next door to your practice.
Yeah, it used to be part of my side used to be part of his gym, and they just put a wall in the middle. So I've got 1,200 square feet. He's got about 1,500. He's got all the equipment. I was going to buy all that and still hope to. But it did a handshake deal. And then we were, obviously going to write it up and get some lawyers involved. But as soon as we made the deal the second time, I ordered this climb mill because I'd been in contact with the company and took out a loan, pretty substantial loan at a really good interest rate, especially during the COVID times. I used that. So the deal didn't go through. Hopefully, eventually it will. We're still in open communications with that, but it kind of went back and forth, with having a gym during this time. It's bad, and then it's good, and then it's bad, and then it's good. So he's going through a good phase right now, and he seems to get more interested when it gets a little more crazy. But anyway, I still do use the climb mill every week. I love it. I love how they're popular now. Everybody wants a climb mill. So I think, I could probably sell it for twice as much as I paid for it, but I do use that. And then having that loan is amazing because, that took away a lot of the stress, especially with having at one time this year, I had 7 employees. So it took away a lot of that stress as far as what happens if we do have to shut down for 2 weeks because I'm exposed or one of the other people are exposed and then we were exposed to them, or we didn't know how all those rules were playing out. So it was kind of nice not only to have the extra piece of cardio equipment there that I will take over to the other side once we hopefully accomplish that, but also to have that extra cash, liquid cash that I could use to pay the bills or pay someone's salary or something like that.
That's awesome. Yeah, those deals, and there's so many that have almost come through, and some I look back on and thank God they didn't, and some of them I'm like, damn, that would have changed the trajectory, But it's how it goes. We had a great deal going with the local fire department, doing some assessment and training for them for injury prevention, and I thought it went really well. And then we had great data. We presented to the city, and then city leadership changed, and they were not fans. So that one disappeared. So Brian, looking at this last year, I mean, you've accomplished so much. Any words of wisdom for people who are like trying to dig up the kind of courage to go out there on their own? It's not easy. It's not easy, but it doesn't mean that it's impossible and doesn't mean it's not worth it. So what would you tell somebody if they're thinking in the next year to kind of get out of the situation like you were in? Hey, they're an independent contractor, maybe they're an associate, but they really want their own gig. What tips do you have?
Well, the biggest thing I've been told, and I say to other people, is the grass is always greener on the other side. So, a lot of times your deal may be a really good deal. So, I mean, run those numbers and run them again and run them again. Talk with significant others. I talked with a few business coaches that just ran some numbers, and it was really close. And that's why it took me so long to make that decision, because it was comfortable. And it's not going to be comfortable to go out there and, you got to have building insurance and you got to have work comp insurance and you got to have all these things. I had no idea. And again, the grass is always greener, and you get hints of that along the way because that other person says, it's not as easy as you think. Because, you start complaining about these little things and you change the website. Well, then that's going to cost money. And I mean, there's all these small pieces that all about. And the more you try to tell those people, hey, there's a lot of these small things that start adding up. It's not even the hard costs, it's the soft costs, time and things like that. And I've got a family and kids, and the more expensive my time is, or it's worth more as I go through. So the grass is always greener. So make sure it's the right fit as far as numbers go, because a lot of these independent contractor deals I've been hearing about, some of them lately, are more like partnerships. I mean, they're paying pretty small amount. So anyway, grass is always greener, but then also you're going to hear about it. Like, you're going to hear people say, why don't you do this? Why don't you do this? Like, you got to start assessing, okay, I'm doing right by the patients. No matter what, I will always do right by the patient, and they're going to reward you for that, whether they know it or not. My dad is an electrician. He's owned his own business for a long time. His dad owned his business. And I always said, hey, you can charge more. Hey, you can charge more. You can do this. You can do this. You could write this off. And he always said, just do good by the patient, do good by the client. And, that it'll always work out. But I mean, you got to grind. And that's the third thing would be, I worked 3 jobs in the beginning when I started my practice. So don't be afraid to have to do extra things and work 80 to 100 hours a week, but make sure it's the right time, and make sure to look at your contract. If I had the opportunity to actually write my contract with a lawyer, and I knew the ins and outs of it. But if you do have a contract that doesn't allow you to do certain things, make sure you're doing things legally. I'm by the book with everything. I even if it, I always want to be a good person, but then also follow rules. So to make sure, you have all those things in place before you do it. And then I guess the fourth thing would be whoever you're with. And again, we're targeting this to people that are in that position, maybe going out on their own or thinking about it. Talk it over with that person. If you trust them enough, which you should, talk it over with them and tell them what your ideas and plans are, and just so they don't feel burned at the end. And I've talked to the other doc and the other 2 massage therapists, even the trainer. I said, hey, look, I'm going to tell you, if you want to leave, after a contract and things like that, the contract's just there because you never know. But after those terms, if you want to leave, you don't ever feel bad for doing that. It's going to suck. I'm going to tell you, hey, this sucks. Is there anything we can do to make you stay? Because we love you being part of the team. But just communication, talk to me if there's something that that seems off that we can try to fix. Don't let things fester. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think those are great tips, man, because communication internally and externally is so important. It just can't be, you can't have too much of it. Like, I tell my kids 100 times every week, say, please, say thank you, and I don't know how many more times they need to hear it, but they forget. They have a little amnesia, where I tell my wife, like, hey, just to double check, I'm picking the boys up today from school. Right. It's like, yeah, we talked about it last night. I know. I just want to double check. You can't do it too much. Like it doesn't encumber anything, but every once in a while something gets missed, and it just helps so much. And I've had, at one point I had 13 employees, and you don't realize what that other person is thinking sometimes. Or they heard you say something in a moment that you weren't thinking your best, or you're super tired and you just made an offhanded comment, and they've been, like you said, festering on it for weeks. And just get that stuff out into the sunlight. It's the best disinfectant,
It's uncomfortable.
Yeah, it can be. Brene Brown has a line. She says, clear is kind. And that's actually one of the core values for our company. Clear is kind, because it's not easy. But if I say, hey, Brian, you got spinach in your teeth, you'd rather hear that the moment you have spinach in your teeth than 6 hours later after you've talked to, a bunch of people at a dinner party, right? Like, just be clear. Well, Brian, congratulations on making it a year, man. It sounds like you're in the right place. You certainly started in the worst, most difficult year you could, and yet you're growing. Things are going well. So, on behalf of every listener that's listening to this, man, congratulations. You're fighting the good fight. For those people who might want to reach out, where can they find you?
Yeah, best way is honestly Instagram at Dr. Brian Waters with two T's on there.
Yep.
Yeah, with two T's, got to say that. And then outside of that, indiemuscle.com.
Yeah. Indy, short for Indianapolis, indiemuscle.com, you said.
Yep, correct. And then from there, you can find just about everything.
Is that a description of your clinic or just your body?
Yeah, we do get every once in a while muscle and joint. So what is this? And yeah, I don't know if you're familiar. There's another clinic. You hear all these names and you just, what sounds good, what rolls off the tongue. So anyway, yeah, just I like the way it sounds. No matter what it makes people think, I think it gets what we do across.
Awesome, man. Well, listening to this makes me say that I wrap up the podcast the same way every time, and I think you're a perfect example of it. But go out there, maximize your license, and live the life you dream of, everybody. Thanks a lot, Brian.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for checking out these videos. I hope they're useful. We'll cover things like rehab, exercise, business model, progressions, layout, everything else that helps you build a clinic. So if you're interested, you can click here, there, here, or anywhere to get more videos just like this. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you soon.